Welcome to the VIF podcast, recorded on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. This podcast is a chance to hear more from the filmmakers presenting work at the annual Vancouver International Film Festival, as well as year-round at the VIF Centre. We hope you enjoy the show.
Hello and welcome to the VIF podcast. I'm Rowan Keith from the team here at Vancouver International Film Festival, and I'm so excited to be talking to Nicole Bazuin about her new film, Modern Whore. Welcome to the VIF podcast.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you so much for being here. In your own words, could you try and summarize what this film is about?
Yeah, so Modern Whore is a hybrid documentary. It is starring Andrea Werhun, and so she is herself in interview, but also plays herself in a series of reenactments that bring to life her experiences as an escort and as a stripper working in Toronto.
It's such an incredible film. I'm so interested because that kind of relationship with a director, but then it's also starring the person who's written the story and lived the story at the same time and is telling the story in the film. How did that collaboration work and kind of how did this film come into being?
So great question. This film has certainly been a long time in the making. Andrea and I met over 10 years ago. I was directing a music video, like a passion project music video, and I wanted to do like a 1960s kind of vibe. So nothing much has changed if people know my style. And for that, I wanted some go-go dancers in the music video. I wanted two go-go dancers. So Andrea was recommended to me through friends, and she showed up on the set. I introduced myself and I said, "Hi, I'm Nicole. I'll be the director, and I will also be go-go dancing with you because the other go-go dancer didn't show up." So our meet cute was dancing in this video together, and from there we started just a friendship. We got along really well, and then this creative crush kind of grew out of that, where she started to see some of my visual art, my paintings, drawings, my film work, and I started to read some of her stories. And we, had this desire to collaborate, and that grew into the Modern Whore book that we did together, which we originally self-published in 2018 in association with Impulse B Publishing. And from there, we did two short films together, starring Andrea and directed by me. And then we did another edition of our book. So we worked with Penguin Random House Canada to publish a second edition. And I should mention the book is a series of stories written by Andrea that chronicles her experiences as a sex worker in Toronto. And it's accompanied by photographs by me. So that it's like a kind of multimedia endeavor. And so in a way, doing a feature-length film was always part of our aspiration. And it felt like we kind of had to build it through the years with different projects. And so we're really excited now with the film to be able to bring Andrea's experiences to life in this really fulsome way.
That's such an incredible story of how you met, and you can really tell that there's that relationship on screen as well. There's clearly such trust and also just comfort and fun there as well. You've kind of mentioned as well your style and this visually this was so fun to watch. But it also kind of defies definition in terms of genre, because it's not quite documentary, but it's not quite narrative. It's a bit of everything in the most amazing way. Watching it, I almost felt like it was kind of like Gilmore Girls with the amount of cultural touchstones and reference points that come in, which was so fun. You obviously got the reference to Dolly Parton's 9 to 5, and then there's obviously the Carrie Bradshaw of it with the typing at the window, and then the sports commentary moment. I guess what were your kind of inspirations that you were pulling from here?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I love you spying these various references. I have not heard of a parallel to Gilmore Girls, but I love that. Yeah, I think in terms of the inspiration for some of these references, it kind of runs the gamut. I feel like the Modern Whore cinematic universe seems to lend itself to just these kind of to genre references and colorful, sometimes almost cartoonish kind of realizations in the film. But yeah, one thing I'll mention is, this is a film which starts out with Andrea saying, the majority of the representations we see of sex workers in, popular culture, let's say TVs, movies, etc., are, victim or villain. kind of archetypes. And so that's where the film starts. And there's this notion of wanting to offer something different. And that really starts by having a sex worker actually be in a position of power in how her story is told. And through that, we can move beyond, these tired, regressive, and harmful stereotypes and kind of offer something new. And I think part of that is, Andrea's notion of not a femme fatale, not a kind of feminine archetype that's meant to represent like female or woman's sexuality in this kind of dark way, in this way that it's associated with wanting to harm people, in particularly men, within that, and offering a new archetype or exploring what could the new representations, archetypes, associations be that we see not only for sex workers, but for, femmes in general as well, new feminine archetypes. And so I think like references like Dolly Parton in the film, references like Mary Tyler Moore, I think they kind of speak to this notion of Andrea's concept of the femme vitale. So as opposed to the femme fatale, the femme vitale has a sexy element but it's in a way that feels positive, and it's full of self-love and a sense of community. And so I think, it's about having an awareness of the representations that we create as filmmakers, as artists, as people who bring those kind of archetypes into the world.
Yeah. And it's watching it's so refreshing to watch something where she is the person in power and in control of the story. And it's also really fun. Like, visually it's fun, but so much of the story is really funny. Obviously, she's so clever and witty, an incredible performer. And, like, it obviously touches on some more sinister moments, but there's so much, like, joy in it, which is just so lovely to see. Obviously, you mentioned that there are so many representations in television and film that you're kind of aware of when you're making this. I do think it's interesting that this film is being released in the year that Anora has just won the Oscar, and obviously Andrea was a consultant on that film. Do you feel like that impacted your process of making it, or kind of as you release it, are you aware that that's infiltrated the conversations at all?
I guess I'll tell the story a little bit if people are curious about how that association grew. So Andrea and I did the Modern Horror book together, and it's her stories, it's her memoir, and I did photography to illustrate that. And so Sean Baker came across the book, and he read it, and he slid into Andrea's DMs and said, I'm working on yet another project that has to do with sex work, another film. And do you do consulting work? And Andrea said, heck yeah, I do. So that led to Andrea being the key consultant on Anora in terms of the script of the sex worker representation in the script. So she worked with Sean on that. And once her work was finished, she and I decided to shoot our shot and ask Sean if he would be an EP, be an executive producer on our film, Modern Horror, which we had already had well in the works at that point. So we pitched the idea to him on a patio in West Hollywood, and he very graciously said yes. And this is when he was on a break from shooting Anora, so he was very much in the process of it. And, so it was just very interesting then to, in a way, be in each other's orbit over the next year or so, where we saw Anora absolutely explode, as we all know, and have such a whirlwind year. And all the while, Andrea and I were working on our own film. And Sean very graciously made time to meet with us and help to support, the vision of what we wanted to make. And so, yeah, it's interesting how these projects kind of feel like they're happening as part of this wave, or who knows of what led to it. But I think, what's really key is Anora is a film where there's a sex worker character. We see this film as like a film about sex work, but with a specific lens, and that's to try to bring Andrea's experience to life and acknowledging that that is one of a multitude of different experiences of sex work. But we really wanted to bring that, to life and do it in a way that felt authentic to her. And I think, if folks enjoyed Anora and then that brings them to want to watch our film. Like another reflection I heard about our movie was that it's if Anora could speak to the camera, then that's modern horror. So I like the notion that like if it is part of a growing interest or a movement that, these films can kind of lead people to experience new ones, and that would be great. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's so I love that you mentioned the kind of community aspect of it, because I really loved those scenes in the film where they're all around the dinner table and also having those different perspectives. Obviously this is, as you say, like this is Andrea's perspective on the industry, and then to have these other people in to kind of just give a bit more variety is so lovely. And that like element of just like the strength of the community as well, and the strength of these people bonding together, and especially without the protections that sex workers should have, and unfortunately don't. It's like lovely to see these people all kind of sticking together and helping each other out. I found it really interesting that you chose to shoot around this kind of like dinner table setup. Could you talk a little bit about that choice?
Sure. Yeah. So essentially, Andrea's not the only subject in the documentary. Her mom is in the documentary, her boyfriend, and then, yes, her friends who have also had sex work experience are in the film. And like you said, there are scenes where they're, all 5 of them are sitting together at a table. And I guess my thought on how to stage that was, I kind of wanted it to feel like iconic, like epic, yet also kind of casual at the same time. Like this notion of they could just be getting together to socialize and having this discussion, but kind of elevating that in this kind of epic way where they're almost like deities at the table. Because it almost has that Last Supper kind of look to it, where
Absolutely.
it's like, they are opened out to the audience in this discussion. And so I guess that was my thought on how to stage it visually, but of course also just have a context where they could have this conversation with each other. And that was one of the elements of the film that was like the most unpredictable, because it was like, how will they all bounce around these various themes that we talk about in the film? And it was just like wonderful because to just see what their energies are like playing off each other. And so it was awesome to be able to capture that. And it's a wonderful aspect of the film to see their sort of chemistry with each other.
And I love, like, so much in the film, I love this kind of idea of sex work is a kind of performance. And obviously that you see that in Andrea, she's such an incredible performer, and it's like obviously that makes sense because that's what she's done for her whole career. And I feel like that's kind of why those people make such good subjects, is because they're used to that kind of performance element. And it's just like a fantastic kind of part of it, I think. I wanted to ask about, there's obviously been a lot of conversation about intimacy coordinators on sets recently, which is fantastic. And I can imagine that was a huge part of this film, particularly with Andrea re-enacting certain like traumatic moments in her life, or just more difficult moments. Can you talk a little bit about how you integrated that into your process?
Yes, absolutely. And you were correct to say that an intimacy coordinator was like a key role on this film. So our intimacy coordinator, her name is Anisa Tejpar, and we were joking that she was the hardest working intimacy coordinator in showbiz on our film. Just because I feel like when you experience the film, because the scenes are broken up by various things, like will be interviews and things, you might not think it's so dense with these intimacy scenes, but once we actually got into rehearsal, it was like, oh, there's a lot of intimacy scenes to choreograph here. And so Anissa was just so incredible in terms of managing all the dynamics, all the details of the intimacy scenes, and to really help, to help me achieve like my vision for them, what I wanted from them, like artistically, visually, and then to get everyone's comfort to be really thought through. And so that was remarkable to be able to work with her that way. And yeah, as you mentioned, some of these scenes are especially sensitive because Andrea is very, very bravely reenacting assaults that she experienced while on the job. And so that was something we really had to approach with a lot of care and sensitivity. And so in addition to working with Anissa, we also had a trauma-informed sex work counselor
Amazing.
available on set. And that was someone who Andrea knows well and is comfortable with. And so it was really wonderful to so this is to me as well the benefit of the fact that Andrea is not only the star and co-writer of the film, she and subject star, whatever you want to call it, but she's also a producer on the film. So it sort of means that we can design a context in which to make this piece that can support her, can well support her, because she's like part of that, how it's constructed. She's part of that conversation every step of the way. So I think that was really key to how we approached the film in general. But yeah, it was a good experience. I really appreciated, everyone that came together to make those scenes, to make them work. Yeah.
Amazing. And it feels like that is a kind of a growing thing that's happening at the moment, is particularly female actors who are starring in films and also producing them. It feels like there's then so much more agency in how these things are made and like the experiences that people have on them. So I'm really glad to hear that that's happening. I really loved the costuming in this film. Obviously there's like so many incredible costumes in terms of like the lingerie sets and like just like absolutely stunning outfits. But I found it really interesting that then in such a kind of like vibrant, colorful film, Andrea's kind of talking to camera moments, her in a black turtleneck. Was that like a purposeful choice that you made?
Yes, absolutely. It was purposeful because I think it was interesting because there's like all these different Andreas that are in the film. And so within a film like this, it's like sort of the visual cue of like, who's this version of Andrea? Because we have the kind of writer Andrea that's in her little like jean and like t-shirt kind of look. And then like you said, we have this sort of main interview Andrea that's in her turtleneck dress kind of look with her natural curly hair. And then that's in contrast with reenactment Andrea, which kind of runs the gamut a little bit visually. So I think when it came to that turtleneck look, I mean, one thing it kind of reminded me of was Audrey Hepburn in I think it's Funny Girl, or Funny Face.
Yes, I can picture exactly the image that you mean.
It's like an Audrey Hepburn. So it gives me this vibe of like a theatrical kind of theater performer.
Yeah.
Which I love because it's sort of like, positioning Andrea as being like the artist, the artiste.
Yes.
The theater star who's kind of in such a chic look, but then can kind of create a contrast to the reenactments. So hopefully that creates a little bit of a differentiation between her being herself, in interview versus like something that's a little more constructed, to say the least, with the scripted reenactments.
And I love that it kind of almost like pokes fun at that very serious, like intense version of I guess like artistry as opposed to like all of these like very fun scenes, and kind of shows that you can have the both in one, which is lovely.
Yeah, totally. It's all about like these different facets of one's persona and personality, for sure.
You mentioned there that there's so many different Andreas in the film, and I think I found it really interesting that you have obviously all of these different Andreas, and then you have the photos that you took of Andrea for the book, and then you also have photos of Andrea from the time that she's talking about. And I noticed that those photos kind of were introduced later on in the film, and the first, I would say, like half-ish is very much kind of either the constructed or anything that's happening like contemporary to when the film's being made, or I guess the photos in the book. And then also the introduction of, and I love that the film kind of pokes fun of this, but the boyfriend reveal kind of comes halfway through, and the conversation with her mum comes later as well. And I'm interested in why you chose to bring those, like, it's funny because it's all real life, but those like things that feel more solidly like her real life, and also almost maybe more personal in kind of in that like later stage.
That's a really great question. I mean, I think I did think structurally it was nice to kind of, hopefully get the audience sort of just on the journey alongside Andrea of how she got into the industry, and that we're sort of from the beginning of the film on that ride, and we're like along for the ride. And then, partway through the film, we introduce shame. We introduce, that as a theme in the story. And alongside that kind of came the introduction of Andrea's mom, because she reveals that, one of the most like painful elements of having shame related to her job as an escort at this point in the story was to keep that secret from her mom, who was someone that she'd always felt so close to, and like she could talk to her mom about anything. So, it felt like the desire to establish and kind of get us into the story before we can kind of get into these different elements, like meeting mom or meeting her boyfriend. And I like this notion that it hopefully keeps the audience on their toes a little bit of like, where are we going to go next? Who are we going to meet next as the story kind of deepens and develops? Because you're absolutely right. It sort of happens that way all the while, because we kind of introduce the friends. And I hope that it's kind of makes it exciting in terms of where we go with Andrea in her world, as her world opens up through the film and we learn more about her experiences.
Definitely. And I really love that, like, in a film, I feel like all of the narratives that we have of sex workers where they aren't completely demonized is that there's some sort of like male savior or romantic savior, especially like, the pretty woman stereotype. But I really love that, even though obviously Andrea's partner is in the documentary and seems like a wonderful man, like her relationship with her mum is really the like core love story here. And the moment at the end where Andrea is kind of says to her mum, like, it's the greatest privilege of my life to be loved by you, is like, I like welled up. I was like, I wasn't expecting going into this film to be like getting emotional about my relationship with my mum.
Yeah.
It's like so lovely.
I'm so glad.
And I think it's just so nice that something that's so universal, like, I think it's one of the things that I really love about the documentary is that it takes something that people think of being very like kind of ostracized in society, and like especially with the story, like the stories of abuse, that's something that like that's only something that these people face, and Andrea's like, no, that's probably the case everywhere. But like I also just love that there's like such universal elements of something that people think that they can't relate to. And it was just such a nice moment.
Yeah, it was such a incredible moment. I was choking back my own sobs as we shot that moment, like on set, and it was like, this is part of the interesting thing about documentary is like, with all of the subjects, we had conversations beforehand to really make sure everyone was comfortable with whatever, was going to be discussed, and kind of do a pre-interview, see what they might want to talk about. So of course we met with Andrea and her mom before we shot, but you don't really know. It's like a bit of an experiment of where these conversations will lead once you actually have them on set. And it was just an incredible conversation. I'm so glad to hear that it's resonating with people. It's so powerful that her mom was part of this film. And that's really why we wanted to do this as a hybrid documentary, it felt like an opportunity to show real people. And so thinking about the representations we want to see of sex workers, it felt important to, represent a relationship with her mom where, it doesn't mean her mom agrees with the work or that choice, but can love her and support her anyway. And to actually be able to capture that on film with the real people felt, like the representation we want to see in the world. And it hopefully may help other folks, other sex workers with the relationships they have to navigate that. Then that would be like definitely the impact that we would want. We were so lucky that all of our subjects agreed to be part of this.
And I think it's like, as much as obviously Andrea should be taken on her own word, I do think there's something in having these other voices that are close to her that kind of like verifies the story almost. Not that it should need that, but I think there is that thing of especially women not being like listened to about their own experiences. So it's really lovely that you can see the kind of like love and support that is there. And especially the moment where her mum's like, she's like working a normal job and coming home crying, and her mum's like, that's not for you. And like, that's so nice. And it's like, obviously as a mother, if you can see the contrast, you're like, oh yeah, of course. Which is so wonderful. And I love that also kind of ties into like this film touches, for like an 80-minute film, touches on so many big topics, and that kind of discussion of capitalism. And I think one of the other subjects mentions like, we're essentially all purchasing our survival. And it was, again, one of those things where I was like, poof, like I haven't really thought.
That's Kotoko. They definitely say that, articulate that very well.
Which is kind of amazing that you touch on so many things in such a short space of time, but also don't over explain at any moment.
I'm so glad to hear it came across that way, because I know it is an 80-minute film, but I agree it does cover a lot of topics. So I'm glad you felt it was effective that way.
Yes, absolutely. And I kind of love how much there's a lot of things that I think could be over explained. For example, like really early on, they mentioned about the STIs, and that Madame is like, oh, like that very rarely happens. Andrea's like, this happens all the time. But then it's like, but I take antibiotics and it's fine. And it's like so quickly like squashed, which is really great. As I've said, like this film is incredibly moving, and I feel like it touches on so many things, and it's kind of like quite a like powerful thing in terms of making you want to do something and understand the cause. What do you think are like the next steps for this? And if people are kind of leaving this film wanting to take action, what do you recommend people can do to help advocate for sex workers?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely want this film to have a social and political impact. So, I hope that it, for civilians who are not sex workers, may shift their point of view if in terms of sex worker rights, because I really do think like the personal is political in this instance.
Absolutely.
Just in terms of if it can achieve its goal of having you kind of walk in Andrea's shoes for 80 minutes, then maybe that can be a bit of a perspective shift on the work and what sex workers are advocating for, which is full decriminalization of sex work. So I really hope that it can kind of have that impact. I think that what is so key is now like doing things like we are right now. So actually getting the film out there to festivals, helping it reach audiences. Because to me, yes, we touch on decriminalization, we touch on sex worker rights in the film, but I think, it's also about not just what's said in the film, but what we can say in the conversations that surround the movie. Like I'm so excited for tonight. Andrea and myself will both be at the screening for VIF. And I think it'll be an opportunity to kind of expand the conversation, see what questions people have about the film. So that's I think kind of where the impact grows is not just in the film, but it's sort of the stories and the branches that come out from it. And I think this is really a film that's a love letter to Andrea, and a love letter to the sex worker community, and realizing that, Andrea's is just one of a multitude of stories and experiences that absolutely does not speak for all sex workers. But that said, we hope it may feel like relatable to some extent, for sex workers who watch it. And regardless of that it hopefully may help others to tell their stories, because we want to see more visibility. And that does have to start, it's a political thing, but it's also a social thing, because we talk about stigma, we talk about shame as being those elements that are part of keeping sex workers silenced. And of course, criminalization keeps sex workers silenced. And so, it's a film that has humor in it. It's a film where we try to have joy, but it's a very brave film on Andrea's behalf and on everyone who appeared in it. And so I really hope it has a positive impact. Yeah.
I'm sure it will. Is there anything, so when we're filming this, it premiered at TIFF, Toronto International Film Festival, just under a month ago. So from now having seen it in cinemas and experienced it with an audience, is there anything in the kind of audience reaction that surprised you or like pleased you or?
I mean, it definitely pleases me to have an audience watch the film. I also am the editor of the film. So leading up to TIFF were many months of me in my editing cave making this movie. And that experience is just so like isolating and insular. And I'm thinking about the audience all the way, but like it's just so amazing to have it actually be out there and have people reacting and hearing them laughing in the audience, hearing the reactions. We screened the film for the subjects prior to releasing it, but still actually being able to gather and watch it together and have everyone see the final product with all the polish. It's just like incredible. And, Toronto was great because we are Toronto filmmakers. So that's where we made the film. It was a great opportunity for it to be accessible, for the cast and crew to kind of come out and celebrate. It's wonderful to actually have it in audiences. Thinking of what surprised me. I guess like the surprised me. I guess it was like I had a notion in my mind of what I wanted the film to feel like. And so I think it was more like a feeling of validation, to have folks be laughing or feeling joyful or reacting felt kind of like, the hopes that Andrea and our producer Lauren Grant and myself had for the film. It was like not just a fantasy, it was starting to come into reality. But that's also in our hometown. And I think what's so special about coming here to Vancouver is to now be bringing it outside of our little like Toronto hometown and finding new audiences, and hopefully they'll be kind to us. We'll see.
Sure they will.
We'll see what the reactions are like, but that'll be part of, the journey of the film. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think I always think about with the editing process of a film, and I guess also the directing process, is like, obviously, like, we all know that feeling of like when you make a joke and no one laughs, but like that's instantaneous. It must be so stressful to like write and direct and edit a joke and then have to wait so long to see if it's gonna land.
Yeah, I feel like it's like, I don't know. I think when you're making this kind of thing, at least for me, it's like you just have to kind of repress or like do away with any kind of fear in that regard, and just kind of, like if I'm excited about what it is, like that's got to be good enough until like it's got to be good enough, and then you just kind of hope people derive some sort of pleasure out of watching it. Yeah.
Well, I think they absolutely will. I can't imagine watching this film and not having fun with it. but also having so much to think about as well. This brings us on to our last couple of questions. Thank you so much for talking to us about your film.
My pleasure.
A couple of things that we ask all of our filmmakers on here is, what is your best memory of cinema or being in a cinema?
Wow, that's such a amazing question. My best memory of cinema. I mean, I guess I bet folks probably talk about early experiences or yeah, I think when you're, just I think that movies, it's so interesting to reflect on them because they're a part of how we like when you're a kid, you're so curious about life and what your life is going to be like and other people's lives. And I think movies start to be a way that you reflect on your own life and you reflect on the world and learn about it. And the interesting thing is in a way that never stops. And that's like what's powerful about cinema. And I find that certain films, as I reflect about what I want to make, and what I want to contribute into the world, it's like there's certain films I think about that I watched as a kid that sort of they definitely have impacted me. Like I think about the Muppet movies. Like when you asked me about that, somehow there was like this experience of watching the Muppet movies as a kid that felt transformative because I just found it like this whole universe that was so creative and colorful and funny, but also so joyful and so positive. And it's the kind of thing that, and there's so much play and there's so much like crafting in this kind of world. And to me, it's a very positive kind of contribution into the world. And I think like, I guess like Jim Henson has inspired me in some weird way in terms of what I want to do, because I do want to make people like feel good on some level. But like with a film like this, it's that joy that you mentioned and that sense of play, but also married with, like a topic that we're so passionate about. And is it possible to kind of combine that? It's like Muppets with like a sort of like socio-political aims behind it. So yeah, but you kind of think about those, what are those things that sparked joy when you experience cinema? And that would be one for me.
Amazing. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't have said Muppets, but when you described it, I was like, oh yeah, I can see that. And like, I mean, it is educational.
Okay,
so
think about Miss Piggy.
Yeah.
And then think about, some of what Andrea does in this movie. It's like there's a certain, because, there's an element of glamour, but it's always a little funny. It's a little bit silly. So yeah.
That's so funny. I think it was someone was on the Culturistas podcast recently. And I think it may have been Amy Poehler, but I may be wrong. It was a female comedian of some sort, and she was like, Miss Piggy was my inspiration growing up.
Yeah.
That's so funny. And I guess it is educational as well. So there's a little bit of the like Sesame Street element, but for grown-ups in there.
You nailed it. Because that's another thing I'm really interested in is sort of like, how can you, like, it's like the spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down sort of thing. But how can you impart something that's actually useful information, but do it in an engaging way? And you're absolutely right. Like the Sesame Street aspect of that is totally, yeah.
And I love that in the film you have that moment where she's kind of like presenting to the class and it's like poking fun, but it's like, but you are actually learning at the same time.
Yeah.
And I feel like sometimes adults need to be like coddled into that a little bit more than kids do.
Why not make it fun if you can? Yeah.
Exactly. And then our last question, and I'm actually very interested to hear what you say about this because we've touched on so many things already. But if you could pick any film to play in a double bill with this one, what would you choose?
There's a film called Working Girls by Lizzie Borden. I believe it's from 1985. That would be a really cool double bill, because that is a narrative film that's about being a sex worker. And, Lizzie Borden came out years after making that film as having had sex work experience. It wasn't something she was out about at the time of making it. But it really is a remarkable movie. And I feel like why that would be a cool double bill is like, since our film is a doc and it's also from decades later, it would be kind of cool to put those films together and sort of see how they might play off of each other. I also really like Kokomo City by D. Smith. So that was a film that I saw at Sundance in 2023. And that is a doc about Black trans sex workers. And it is incredibly beautifully shot. But what's kind of cool about it is it's black and white and modern horse so colorful. So I think it would be really cool to see the two together. And the subjects in that documentary are incredible. Like, everyone should see Kokomo City for sure. So those would be two double bills, but I feel like you could keep going and going. You could watch Anora with modern horror. Really just watch modern horror.
Yeah,
is what's at the bottom of it. Yeah,
I think. Those are all great choices. Not quite the Muppets Christmas Carol, but
yeah, not quite.
Might be a bit of strange programming.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a good takeaway. Everyone should watch Modern Horror.
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been really, really great talking to you, and I wish you all the best with this film and everything else that you work on.
Thank you so much. This is so fun.
Thank you.
Happy VIF.
Happy VIF.
Thanks for listening to the VIP podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave a review. Also, check out vif.org to learn more about what's happening at the VIF Center year-round.